Since the rise of social media in the early aughts, we've certainly seen platforms come and go. I occasionally think and wonder how my MySpace page is doing. But few have seen the type of rapid upheaval that Twitter has seen in recent weeks, leading many users to seek new social frontiers. But the landscape is vast, and there are a lot of options out there with a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and a lot of confusion, as many are finding. So joining me to break it all down is Wired Tech writer Drew Austin and professor of journalism at Northeastern University, Dan Kennedy. Welcome to both of you. Drew, I want to start with you. I have been in love with Twitter. I've been a user of Twitter since 2011. I feel like I figured out how to use it effectively when Mayor Menino announced that he was going to not seek another term. I think it was March in 2013. And I could figure out by the people I was following what was happening. And I said, Eureka, I know how to use Twitter. And now I'm just sitting at home, sad, looking at my phone. What's the current state as of right now today, which we know may change in a minute, of the Twitter sphere?
Well, so I'll preface this by saying that I feel like I'm going down with the ship. I haven't attempted to leave Twitter, and I don't really think I'm going to unless it actually stops existing. I feel like there's a perception now that Twitter, as a user, the experience is getting worse and worse under Elon Musk. I don't see it from a sort of product perspective. Like, I actually feel like the platform, to me, seems to be working the same way it always has. I think the vibe has changed. Like, the way people are talking about Twitter on Twitter is different. I also do think that it was kind of already getting like that before Elon Musk took over. So to me, the worst thing now is just that everybody's talking about Elon Musk all the time on Twitter, and I'm just sick of hearing about him. But I mean, there are some signs that as a business and a platform, it could have serious issues in the near future. Currently, I don't see any like noticeable changes as a user, but I'm sure that things will come.
Dan, we've certainly been through the emergence of new media over the years. I mean, nothing new is about something coming and going, and certainly over the past few years, we've seen new media emerge and then kind of just disappear or fizzle or really, connect, like TikTok. I don't think anybody really would have thought that TikTok was going to make it after other short video clip services did not. But there is something a little bit spectacular about how rapid this changeover is. Am I wrong on that, or do you agree?
No, it is pretty wild. And I mean, let's keep in mind that Twitter was pretty much the smallest of the social platforms. So in some ways, it wasn't all that important, but it was certainly a place where academics, journalists, and media people really like to hang out. I've been a heavy user for years, but things come and go. I have to say, I set up on Mastodon, oh gosh, almost a month ago now, and I'm getting 70 to 80% of what I liked about Twitter and pretty much 0% of what I didn't like about Twitter.
So what is it, Dan? What is it that, because I tried to go on Mastodon and my head exploded. I didn't get past the registration login part. My head just exploded. What is it that you're finding on Mastodon, which is one of the places people are fleeing to, that was on Twitter that you're finding is being replaced there?
Well, the problem with Mastodon, I mean, I suppose the advantage, but also the problem is that it's a completely decentralized service, and you have to start off by joining a particular server, which they use this very precious language. They call it an instance. And that can be very confusing to people, and some instances aren't letting people on right away. But honestly, once you're on, the experience is very much like Twitter, and you can follow people who are on other instances, and it's great. I mean, I'm following basically the same core people who I was following on Twitter. And there's almost as much signal as there was on Twitter, and virtually no noise.
Drew, I've made the leap over to I'm still on Twitter, and I'm going to go down with the ship as well because I love Twitter and I'm rooting for it. But I've gone on also over to Post News. What's that website about? It seems like if Facebook and Twitter had a baby and gave birth, it would be that website.
Which website did you say?
The Post one, the Post News.
Oh, yeah, I actually haven't used that. But one of the things that I was writing about in the article that I wrote for Wired recently about this was that I think there is an assumption, and I mean, what Dan described about Mastodon is really interesting. I've used Mastodon years ago. I haven't made the leap most recently, although I might check it out after how Dan described it because that made it sound more appealing. But I feel like there's this assumption that we can always replace any platform that kind of degrades. And what I think the history of social media or the last 20 years of the internet shows us is that sometimes things go away and there actually is no replacement for them. And you just kind of have to live without them or replace them with something that's not really the same. I'm not saying that Mastodon is or isn't an adequate replacement, but that's kind of what that's my hunch. And I feel like it's been sort of validated over my lifetime as an internet user.
So the thing that's fascinating me about social media is I used to say this on Facebook all the time many years ago when it first started, and they would change something and people would complain about it, and I'd be like, it's a free service. Like, if you don't like it, you can leave. They're taking something from you, which you're unaware of, but if you don't like it, they're really not, they don't care. And I find myself sort of ironically or tragically in that same spot with Twitter, where I feel like I have invested a lot of my emotional and intellectual capital in Twitter. And like, as you said, I don't really want to go on and talk about anything I tweet now. People look at and say, well, that's about Elon Musk, isn't it? And it's like, you know what? I can go all day without thinking about Elon Musk. I just want my Twitter to be my town square with my journalists and activists and newsmakers that I follow, because I use it as a news source. Where can I go for that if Twitter's not going to be that for me?
Well, GBH News is on Mastodon, Sue.
Right.
So are a lot of other news organizations. You know, I mean, it's difficult because we may be seeing a splintering. And the nice thing about Twitter was that there was just one go-to place. Now, I'm still on Twitter. I've been trying out Post News, and, you know, it's okay. I think they have a ways to go technologically. But all of a sudden, I'm keeping an eye on 3 different things, plus Facebook, plus Instagram, plus LinkedIn. And so, yeah, I mean, life was simpler when all I had to do was go to Twitter primarily for news and conversation, and maybe a couple of other platforms. But we may be heading into a brave new world here.
Drew, do you have any predictions? I mean, I know I listened to the great Kara Swisher's podcast this morning, On with Kara Swisher, and she had the former security privacy executive from Twitter on, and just talking about things to look at. You know, Twitter has a copy of my license. I was a blue check verified person. I take the advice of one of our local former law enforcement people, Andrea Cabral, and I never type anything I don't want read in an open court. But, you know, all my DMs are there, which I haven't paid much attention to. Is there anything that we should be, not just at Twitter, but in general, looking at in the social media world for signals that the ship might be going down or taking a turn that we don't want to be on board anymore?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the massive layoffs and quitting that was created or incited by Elon Musk, I think that's a big red flag. And we don't really know. I mean, I've read a lot about this, and I'm not a super technical person, but I know that a lot of the sort of risks that are created by that many people leaving at once are things you wouldn't necessarily see yet, but maybe like some minor overlooked code that like becomes a big problem at some point. And I mean, we've seen plenty of hacks, even in things that are in theory being operated well. So for a company that already had some issues and then lost more than half of its employees, I mean, there have to be some massive exposures there, whether it's personal data or, I mean, even things that Elon Musk is openly doing, like the way he's sort of waging war on this traditional notion of the blue check. He seems to be very comfortable shutting down accounts or reactivating accounts that were shut down for good reasons. And I think that could go further as he feels more backed into a corner, which he probably will.
Dan, a lot of folks are probably watching and aren't on Twitter, don't care about Twitter, maybe just have Facebook to stay in touch with their grandkids, maybe have a LinkedIn account. Why should people care about what happens at Twitter?
You know, that's a really good question. And as I said, Twitter is a small service, but it's a service that's been very meaningful for people in the media, people in politics, and even people in academia. And that may not take in a huge number of people, which is why Twitter is the smallest of the social platforms. But to those people, it's very important to them. And I don't know that an ordinary person who doesn't use Twitter really has to care about this all that much. But those of us who are in one of those three areas, as well as a few others, yeah, it's pretty meaningful. It really is.
Dan, just as we wrap up quickly, do you think this is going to change dramatically quickly how reporters do their job? I mean, I may actually have to talk to people again.
Oh, heaven forbid. You know, it's been a great way of reaching people, even if you're not just tweeting at them. You connect with them through direct messages and all of that. And it's not going to be as easy, that's for sure. Not with not knowing what service people are on, where to find them. It's going to be a real challenge.
Boy, we might have to use telephones too, Drew. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's time for that. I think there's something nice about that we've lost. So it could be time for it to come back in a retro way.
I'm bringing back voicemail, so stay tuned. All right, Drew Austin and Dan Kennedy, I'll see you somewhere on some social media platform. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.